Something happens to you when you leave this town. The farther away, the hazier it all gets. But me, I never left. I remember all of it.
To the losers.
We made an oath.
Swear? If it isn't dead, if it ever comes back, we'll come back to it.
We didn't stop it.
Pennywise.
The clown. We can't let it happen again.
Hello?
Kid!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. Today we are discussing It, Chapter 2, directed by Andy Muschietti. This is the same director and about half of the same writing crew as It, Chapter 1 in 2017, directed by Andy Muschietti as well. This time we do not have Cary Joe Fukunaga and Chase Palmer on the writing team. It Chapter 2. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. EliasRoushMedia.com. Here's a synopsis. It Chapter 2. 27 years after their first encounter with the terrifying Pennywise, the Losers Club has grown up and moved away until a devastating phone call brings them back. So, It Chapter 2, I'll be honest, I did have really high, I had high, not interpretation, but, expectations for, sorry, I don't know why I couldn't remember. I had high expectations for It Chapter 2, and just long story short, for It Chapter 1, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was one of the best movies of the year, maybe one of the best movies of the decade, horror movies, that is. I thought it worked on all cylinders. I thought, it was an excellent horror comedy, and it really touched on a coming-of-age story within these characters, especially the young actors playing all of the characters. Really loved all of the acting, and it just felt natural. It really felt like this was an embodied, lived-in world. So coming into It Chapter 2, I did have high expectations, I'm not going to lie. But having over three-fourths of the first movie's, pre-production, backing this production, minus two of the writers, a lot of it is going to be the same. It is... I was hoping it would be the same, same style, same production, kind of same atmosphere, kind of just returning this kind of sort of nostalgia fest that I thought we were going to have. And in a way, it is a nostalgia fest, for better or for worse. Let me talk about a couple of things that I do like before I talk about anything I don't like or I'm not too crazy about. First of all, let's talk about the casting, the look. I think the look of the casting works a lot better than some of the acting of the casting. Jessica Chastain as Beverly. I think she looks a lot more like Beverly than acts like her. Kind of the same things for James McAvoy as Bill. One of the probably standout characters you're going to hear about this movie specifically is the character Richie Tozer, played by Bill Hader. And Bill Hader is one of my favorite, standing last 10 years actors, just doing phenomenal work on, no matter if he's on SNL or if he's on HBO or if he's on, any sort of type of movie. He's just excellent. And I think this is another really great role for him. Isaiah Mustafa is the former Old Spice guy, and he plays Mike Hanlon in here. And I'd say the best thing about the performance is the way that they embody the kids. I think that a lot of I'd say about half of the adults really embody these kids, and I think it's Bill Hader's character, Isaiah Mustafa, and the kid that plays, or the guy that plays Ben. Ben ends up being, he goes from being a chubby boy as a young junior high, kind of little runt, into being, a full-on studded actor. Or not actor, but I mean, he's a stud muffin, he's a good-looking guy. And the thing is, you can still see Ben's face within this guy. I don't know, it's weird even seeing the casting. It almost does seem like they really did, word for word, they wanted to make sure their eyes lined up, their cheekbones lined up, the way they looked. I think that Jay Ryan as Ben did a really great job. James Ranson, I think he's probably one of the number one characters, I would say, that not only looks like the character he plays, but also acts like him. He plays Eddie Kasprak, and he's the guy that's always talking like this. He's always got the pills, and he had the mother that was overbearing, and he was crazy. He was one of my favorite characters in the first It 2017 movie. The young boy that played him, and played by Jack Dylan Grazer. But the guy they got to play him, James Ranson, he just felt like he embodied him. Even the guy that played Stanley, he was always kind of quiet, interesting looking character. And I think the guy that plays him, Andy Bean, my goodness, he really embodied him as well. Let's talk about Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. Another fantastic performance by Bill Skarsgård. I think this guy needs to get out of the makeup or into some more makeup, or he needs to just do some more work. I want to see him outside of the Pennywise lore. I think that he really eats up every scene that he's in as Pennywise, almost to a degree that I'm almost not scared of him in a way, because I'm more fascinated with his performance and all the different effects and different types of atmospheres that this guy's making you feel. So, It Chapter 2, let's talk about, let's do some more pros. The atmosphere, I think, is pretty well translated from the first movie, kind of living in this small town where something's not quite right, all the adults are a little eerie and stuff like that. I thought that translated mostly pretty well into this this movie. You really get transported back to the city of Derry. I will say the town did feel a little bit underpopulated, unlike the first movie. So that's the atmosphere. The actual clown Pennywise, like I said, the character, the effects, all of that is excellent. And I also talked about the character of Eddie embodying my favorite character. My favorite character being Eddie, I thought was not only looked but also played exactly like what you would expect him to be. So we've talked a few minutes about some of the good things about this movie, but I got to do it to you. I'm sorry, everyone that really liked this movie. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to do it to you. X's gonna give it to you. E's gonna give it to you. E's gonna give it to you. I will say before I go in and say anything negative about this, or not so hot about this movie, things I'm a little bit more. I feel like I'm a little bit more perceptive about. I will say that, or I'm aware that I might be nitpicking here and there. I will say I saw a lot of Twitter. I saw a lot of tweets on Twitter regarding this movie, and the majority of people seem pretty positive coming out of it. The not so positive reviews are coming from critics and people that I hear and listen to online. So let's talk about the cons real quick. So the cons. This movie is 2 hours and 49 minutes. And there is absolutely no reason that needs to be that long. Apparently, this movie was originally 3 or 4 hours when it first was edited, and then they edited it down to like 3 hours, and now they finally edited it down to 2 hours and 49 minutes. It's too damn long. It doesn't need to be this long. I don't really see, in comparison to the 2 hours and 15 minutes, why was that extra 30 minutes in here? It just felt way too damn long. The pacing and direction, I would say, they kind of go hand in hand. Felt stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. I never felt like that was the case in the first It 2017 movie. I thought the first It 2017 had a very nice introduction and pacing into the world of Derry, who these characters are and what the problem is, and then how to solve the problem. This felt like it was just like, shove it down in there, shove it. You got to take this storyline, you got to shove it, and you got to take it. And it was just like, it felt so unnatural in a way to, gathering, the crew back together, the Losers Club. It did feel, it felt rushed and ill-directed, and in going along with the pacing, it starts off very grimacingly, I guess, if what I would say, or it's very dark at the beginning, not just like the way it looks, but just the violence it entails at the beginning. That's kind of unnecessary and almost never addressed again. So the tone of it is just instantly way too. I want to say it jumps the shark, but it's not even jumping the shark. It just feels like it has its hands in too many genres, and it doesn't know which ones they want to really, use. It just almost too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing is what it felt like. And the story just suffers along because of the pacing and the tone, because it is so crazy and violent at some points, with this real world violence versus this fantastical or psychological violence or horror. It doesn't always translate well, and like I said, the story suffers because of it. The way they treat mental illness in this, once again, movies just got to be careful the way they're treating these types of subjects. I know that John Travolta was just in a ridiculous movie about someone with mental illness, not with mental illness, but they have they're on the spectrum of some sorts, and they go crazy, and they end up going on a rampage of killing a bunch of people. And it's like John Travolta had a son that passed away that was also on the spectrum, and so you would think that people that had interacted with people that have been going through the similar symptoms, or have talked to people, or if they have family members that are on the spectrum, that you're probably going to have a more than less positive take on the person, not so much negative and so much hostility, I guess, or passive aggressiveness. I don't know. It just feels like when you're talking about these people with mental illness, it just they're just instantly categorized as crazy, and I just fundamentally don't agree with that. I will say one of the miscasts for me that I thought was going to do a lot better, and I generally like him in the majority of things he's in, is James McAvoy. I thought that this guy, knowing he has, somewhat of an accent, I could kind of tell he was kind of covering it a little bit. I don't know if that affected it or not, because he's in the movie Glass and he plays like 20-something different personalities. And I felt like he needed to grab one of those personalities and attach it to this character, because he felt so dry. And the character he needed to be was almost a more likable character. He needed to have more gravitas, I think. And I think McAvoy sometimes comes off cold in some scenes. Not that it's his fault. It's just the tone and the atmosphere just did not serve him in a way that made him feel likable and approachable like he needs to be in this movie. Along with the other actors that I wasn't too crazy about. Jessica Chastain, I was getting flashbacks of Dark Phoenix having her in this. I don't know why. I guess I've only saw that movie once, and she looked bored in that. But I thought that Jessica Chastain did okay in this, and she looks more like Bev than she acts like Bev, in my opinion. Bev had this very sparkly, bright, kind of punk personality in a way, and I never felt like Chastain ever geared into that or channel of Bev. I always felt like Bev was always one of the, she's basically one of the guys that just hung out with the guys. But she just happened to be a young girl. I don't know. I mixed feelings on that casting, honestly. Really wanted my Amy Adams in there, but we got the Sharp Objects for that. Let's just see. Okay, so one initial thought I had after watching it the next day, I saw it last night at this point, most of the cast felt like they were in different movies. The seven individuals in the Losers Club, I felt like, Eddie and Richie thought they were in a comedy. We had Bill, who thought he was in a drama. Jessica Chastain was in a romantic horror drama with Ben. And what does that leave Mike? Mike is in an almost a schlocky, campy horror movie. And it really did feel like everyone is in different movies, and it doesn't, for me personally, doesn't ever translate into a cohesive storyline. And given that it's 3 hours, it just left me hanging thinking, wow, they could have done so much more with, this character, that character. They should have done this, that, and the other. And I was thinking, I don't want to, start crafting my own movie for the, when I'm rating it on the podcast, saying they should have done this, that, and the other. But it does feel like this movie might have benefited better if they would have had extra time, or if they would have released this in 2020, we would have had a slightly better story written out. I'm not sure if the loss of Cary Fukunaga really was that big of an impact, but evidently I felt like whatever they were bringing, whatever they had going in the first movie, I felt really worked. It was the coming of age story with all of these interesting characters that had all of these fleshed out backgrounds, and we cared about them. And I really felt like in the second movie, we just kind of dropped the ball on why we care about these characters. Like, I didn't feel like, even going throughout the movie, I didn't feel like there was growth or progression in a way that made it feel like it was satisfying at the ending. I mean, regardless, I'm not going to say, what happens at the end, but personally, I was left in an unsatisfied area that left too many topics on the table, left too many, dangling threads. I just was not. I really was not thrilled about it, and quite honestly, I was feeling pretty down. I was. I felt like the last maybe 15 minutes, I felt like I was swallowing an apple whole. I was just like, this is a lot more of a downer than I was expecting it for me personally. I know that a lot of people were enjoying it and have a lot of good things to say, but I haven't heard anyone say that this movie made them feel, depressed or down, or just, not in a satisfied state. But honestly, I had to watch some cartoons or comedy to go to sleep before. It wasn't even because I was scared or anything. It was just damn, I really just feel down right now. And I, normally, especially the way the first movie ended, I was like, wow, I had a blast. I had a great time. And coming out of the second, in the first one, at the end of the first one, I was like, I can't wait to watch this again. And I did. I've watched the first one, 10 plus times. The second one, I was thinking, would I watch this again? I was thinking, not only would I not watch this again, I wouldn't turn this on television. I'm having a hard time recommending it. It's honestly disappointing to me personally. I was very, I don't know if my expectations were way too through the roof, or if the likability of the first one just didn't translate to the second one, or if it's got that sophomore slump. It's a combination of things, but ultimately it's that list of the pacing, the tone, the story, and the way they treat the characters. I thought that, and it's entirely too long as well. It does kind of become a little tiring on the set piece after set piece after set piece. Also, there's some interesting CGI going on with the characters. Apparently, they have some CGI. Obviously, they got the CGI going on with the monsters, the graphics and stuff, the computer graphics on the monsters. I thought they generally looked okay. They did not look nearly as scary as the first It. I felt like the first It, one of the things about it was the fact that it didn't use too much CGI or use very minimal. It seemed to have a lot of practical effects to it. Let me see if I can find the budget for It 2. It Chapter 2 budget. So, oh wow. Let me see. It Chapter 2. It Chapter 2 opens below It with a $37 million Friday. Huh. Let me see if I can find how much this movie cost. Because I feel like this movie overall was... it's not available. I can't find the budget for Box Office Mojo. Anyways, I know that the first movie was $35 million on the first It, 2017. And so this one... I have no idea, but ended up grossing $91 million this opening weekend. But it just felt like a lot of... I'm seeing on Wikipedia it's anywhere from 60 to 80 million. So we'll be safe and say they doubled the budget. But I felt like the budget for this only went to special effects and not like practical effects or anything that would really serve the story better. Or having another writer come on, honestly. But yeah, there was it's a loose / thin storyline that brings everyone together and has them going throughout this entire this roller coaster of a ride. I compared the first It to a funhouse, and It 2, let me see. If It 1 is a fun house, It 2 is a fun house, but then someone insults you at the very end. I don't know. someone says something really terrible about you, and makes you feel bad when you're leaving the park or something. That's what this fun house felt like. I don't know. I felt like I didn't want to watch this movie again. I didn't want to. It's hard to recommend. It's technically well done for a horror film, and I guess because it is a horror film, it is technically what I would say, a higher production of a horror film than not. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more let down I was from the overall movie. But anyways, let's talk about It Chapter 2 and spoilers. So we are in the spoiler section for It Chapter 2. So, okay, a couple of the drop plot lines. At the very beginning, there is a gay beating, or a gay bashing, or whatever. I don't remember exactly what the terminology is called. Anti-LGBT group ends up beating the fuck out of a gay man and throwing him and beating him up in front of his lover, or in front of his boyfriend, and throwing him off a bridge. And from there, the guy is drowning, and then he's picked up by Pennywise out of the river, and then Pennywise eats the heart of the gay man in front of his boyfriend. And so I'm hearing a lot of people talk about the way this movie opens up, saying it's way too intense. I didn't sign up for all that. Where did this come from with this real world violence versus, this the violence of Pennywise taking a shape of something or turning into a zombie or something, which that's another plot line. Personally, I was a little shook from the quote unquote gay bashing. It wasn't as intense as I had expected. It was really bad, and knowing that shit really happens, out there in the real world is absolutely heinous and horrible. And if we could stop it, obviously, just like that, obviously we would. I know the reason that they found it was important to talk about was because Stephen King Stephen King had someone in real life in his town was beat. I think he was gay, and I think his name, I don't want to say his name 100% was Charlie Harris, but I want to say it was Charlie, a man named Charlie in his town. He was beat by a couple of assholes just like this. And the way this opens up, it's really fucking intense. I mean, very similar to the way the first It opens up with the 2017 version, munching off Georgie's arm and then taking Georgie into the sewer, which is, quite, it's crazy on the face of it because we don't see that type of shit. We don't see kids getting, killed left and right on regular media. I'd say television, movies generally. We don't see kids taken or, killed generally. But I will say the gay beating, the gay bashing, or whatever you want to call it, yeah, it's going to traumatize some people starting off with that. And it was difficult to start off watching that. It did kind of jump the shark when it decides to, unleash the teeth and munch out his heart. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is like some crazy, just dumb shit. And that's when it kind of took me out of the realm of the gay bashing. Because, I mean, the guy's beat and he's thrown into the river. So once he's thrown into the river, if he was, killed after that somehow, or if, pulled under the water, that's probably just as bad. It did take me out that his heart was eaten by it, though. I thought that, I was like, what the fuck? And the fact that we don't get any resolution throughout the entire movie that's minus a point right there. I mean, it just seems like storytelling 101. You always want to kind of refer back to whatever was initially the cause, or at least referred to it a couple times. I think they offhandedly talk about this beating in one scene, and we see the zombie version of the guy that was beaten and had his heart eaten out. That is it. I was just like, that's just either sloppy editing or it's just bad storytelling. I don't know. And then after that, it goes to each of the individuals, all 7 of the adults, all grown up, and it shows how they're, how they're dealing with everyone, left and right in their lives, whether they're Ben and they're running the news, running corporate offices and stuff like that, or James McAvoy character Bill got in a wreck, and then Stanley ends up killing himself. It's kind of a dark opening. I mean, having Bev having her boyfriend just instantly start beating her is like one of the first scenes we see her in. It really sets a tone of, well, what the fuck? It just feels like, so this is what the characters have been doing, I understand that it's like all of a sudden he's back 27 years later, and when just even talking about it, remembering it, has shit going haywire in their life. But I thought it was seriously ill-toned to have Bev just punched by her husband, by her boyfriend, or whoever the fuck that guy was. I was kind of unclear. but I understood that it had like similarities to how her father was treating her and whatnot. But I was just like, this is too on the fucking nose, and this is honestly just too much. So it opens with the gay bashing, car wrecks, people killing, one of the main 7 killing themselves, Bev being beaten. And this is all within the first 45 minutes, and I'm just like, this is... it left a bad taste in my mouth coming out the gate. And so... there are also people that were killed in the first movie, the repercussions and stuff like that, like the bullies, Bowers. We see what happens to him. The police basically arrest him and send him in a mental institution. And Bowers is approached by one of the zombie bullies from the first movie. And that zombie bully, I don't remember his name. He's one of them. He ends up going missing. He gives Bowers back his knife or something like that and helps him escape. It was so stupid just seeing this entire storyline, just terribly stupid. And also, again, with the mental illness. I mean, this guy is in some sort of I don't know if he's in an asylum, but he's in some like psych ward or something. And showing him do all this is just insane. And then to have him only come back for a couple of jokes with him trying to stab Eddie at some point, and he ends up stabbing Eddie in the cheek. I was just like, oh my gosh. I just felt like Bowers was there for just plot convenience and because they wanted to have some similarities. I don't remember. I haven't read the book for one thing, and I don't remember it 1990 or whenever that one came out. But I like a lot of the stuff. I felt like if this was happening in the books, if this was happening in the previous miniseries, they could have edited it. They could have worked it. They like showing Bowers escaping the asylum, and then the zombies like driving the cars like we gotta go. It's like I was just like, what the fuck? What the fuck? It just drove me through the roof of believability. I was just like, what the fuck am I watching right now? At that point, I knew this was headed for the wrong direction. I was like, this is not the destination I wanted to go on. This was not the trip I was looking for. But yeah. So along with the gay beating, the Beverly being beat, the suicide of one of the 7, the zombie that's apparently driving, and the set piece after set piece that just got so repetitive. I felt like it was Mike's explanation for you need to go get one of the things that helps you remember what was going on in this town, or so everyone has to go split up. And they even address how stupid it is to split up. It is stupid to split up. They unintentionally do it in the first movie because they have to go home, they're kids. But like in this movie, they couldn't figure out a better way to say, hey, let's go check out some of the cool stuff we used to do. Let's go hang out and check out, Old Town, Downtown Derry. It just felt like most of them were just like following Mike because he was telling them all the stuff he had been learning over the couple of years, and none of them were questioning it, saying, maybe this is a bad idea. I mean, at one point, I swear they do. They say this is a bad idea and go and do it anyway. It's some of the story just lacks hard. I felt like there could have been so much, I don't know, easier ways to show this nostalgia fest, because basically what it feels like, this It 2 movie is trying to retread everything that happens in Chapter 1, plus show us additional story in Chapter 2, but also showing clips of what happened at that summer during it, when it came to Derry, and then showing them interacting with it now. It's so much information. It's too damn long. I don't know what the thinking was. I have heard that they are thinking of doing an It 1 and It 2 super version or super cut, where it has both versions put together. It's not like back to back, but they have one full cut where you would have them like flashing back as kids. And I'm curious if that would work a little bit better than this cut would. Although the thing is, the way this movie's functioned and the way it's situated as, it's almost identical to the first It in the way of pacing. It's like, get them all together and then separate everybody. Pennywise goes scares the living Jesus out of everybody, and then after that, they come together and start forming a plan. They end up going, visiting the monster house, and then from there finding out how to defeat it. But it just feels like there's so many detours, and each one of these characters have to have some interaction with it. It becomes so repetitive in nature. And what I heard Double Toasted talking about was it felt like they were on a treadmill. And at one point, it did feel like I was on a treadmill, because I was like, okay, so here our main character is going to go to kind of a darker, scary location. They're going to see someone or something, and that someone or something is going to probably be possessed or taken over by it, ending up in some sort of scary CGI monster and with large teeth. And I think that happened 3 to 4 times for like 40 minutes in the middle of the movie. And I was like, this is too damn much, too repetitive. Get this out of here. So the one that specifically I was like, all right, so this doesn't even make sense. It was the lumberjack that came to life. I think that one started to look like I had heard Bald Move talking about, saying it looked like a Tim Burton monster or something like that. And I was thinking some of these monsters are starting to look like, what's it called? Goosebumps. The Goosebumps movie is what I was thinking of. I was like, this looks goofy in a way. I'm not scared necessarily by any of this. And the weird, most of it was every time it would try to, go through the process of scaring the individual, it became less and less scary because he never did anything past that. He would just scream and run at the person. It's like, do something, the environment would change, but like other than that, I felt like I was in a safe environment generally the majority of the movie until the very end, and they fucking had to kill my favorite character, Eddie. Like I said, I felt like I was eating an entire apple for the last like 10 to 20 minutes of this movie. Eddie was a great character. He wasn't like none of these characters except for maybe Bill Hader's character as Richie I really felt connected to, and that's just because I felt like he embodied him, looked and acted like him. So did the Eddie character and the Richie character. They both embodied and acted like kind of their counterpart, the younger doppelganger kind of. But overall, I was just really pissed off that they killed the Eddie character. It felt like he didn't need to go the way he did. Because the powers of it were so ill-defined through this movie, and he could just turn into anything, do anything to anyone, basically make people possessed and stuff like that. It seemed so difficult to get a grasp about like how to defeat this monster, except for straight up insulting him at the very end. And having Eddie get stabbed at the very end, just kind of, the more I think about it, did feel cheap. I guess I wanted it to be a more noble sacrifice in a way, because Eddie stabs it, and then it falls back on, something that stabs him and sort of deflates him from being the spider, big giant spider thing he is. But in the first it's all about not, conquering your fears, and it turns into their worst fears. Like for Beverly, it turns into his father, her father, and then for Stanley, it turns into that scary painting-looking lady, which we see in this a little bit, and then for Bill, it turned into Georgie. I just felt like those were really on the nose, but they made sense like they're on the nose. It made sense why they were confronted with those fears. For this movie, it didn't feel like they were doing anything but insulting the clown and saying he's not strong, even though you've got this, crazy power to, change everything. It didn't feel like he was, I don't know. It didn't feel like that was the real weakness, and losing Eddie because of that. One of my favorite characters from It, 2017. I was just like, this is a downer. So I was telling Kelly about this. I was like, all right, so at the very end, I was like, we have to see Eddie die, and then we see Bill Hader cry about it, like immediately as he finds out Eddie's dead. I was like, okay, so that's kind of a downer. And then he's upset when he immediately finds out Eddie's dead. He's upset, and then he finds out that they can't carry Eddie out of the monster house for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you why. So they leave his body in the house, and so we have to go outside, and Bill Hader's upset again over Eddie. He's screaming, Eddie, Eddie. They left him inside, and he was dead by this point. Still could have took his body. I don't know. And then we continue with the nostalgia fest and going to the creek at the end, and they all jump in the creek. And by this point, I was kind of, down. I was like, I don't know how I feel about the end of this movie. It's just happening, and it just continues, and the movie continues. It's probably 5 or 10 minutes after it dies. They're still going, and they're somewhat kind of doing this nostalgia mourning fest of, them jumping back in the creek where they had jumped in, 27 years before. I guess they're not in the undies this time. They're tidy whities. They're fully dressed. Yeah, so everyone's swimming, and they're kind of doing a shot-for-shot remake with everyone kind of swimming. This is when Bev and Ben get together, which this really is the only tie-in for Ben. I felt like Ben didn't have anything to do except for think about possibly being, heavy and lonely again, because that was his big thing. And it's like, dude, he is gorgeous right now. Like, he does not have to worry about that. And Beverly is into it. She kisses Ben at this point, and then we turn the camera over and we see Richie is upset again because Eddie's not there. And it's upsetting to see Bill Hader have to cry like on separate occasions 3 or 4 times throughout the last little bit of the movie. And then so they all console Richie at that point again. And then they're going through the slow-mo dairy, or they're going through dairy in slow motion, and they're looking at their reflection, and all of a sudden they go from old to young, and then they realize, it's this kind of the full circle coming of age kind of thing. And I was just thinking, wow, I feel really down right now and old at the same time. I was like, this is depressing on multiple levels. And then they have this slow-mo scene with all of them riding their bikes down Derry and smiling as kids. And, of course, they go through, the Bill, the Richie, the Beverly, the Mike. They go through the entire cast, the Stanley. And then finally they end up on Eddie, and I was so close to tears, because just seeing these kids kind of grow up is, and enjoying that first movie at least is quite a nostalgia fest just for me personally, because it's only been 2 years, but even watching these 2 movies, it does feel like they've grown up a lot, even with the flashbacks that they're in, the limited flashbacks that they're in. They were still good, still excellent. So yeah, and then seeing Eddie's face at the end about tore me up, and I was like, at this point, I was like, I don't know what to do or say, but my thing is, I always think that movies or media is supposed to make you feel something, and if it makes you feel something, if you're happy, you're sad, you're excited, you're scared, it's making you feel something, and that is the purpose of it. The thing is that what you want to feel at the end of the movie? And for me personally, I don't know. Eddie was my favorite character. The way he went out, I don't know. The way Pennywise went out, turned into like a small baby thing. I don't know, it was kind of weird. But anyways, overall, this movie did make me feel something. It's not the movie I wanted it to be, but it ended up being a not bad horror flick, just not the follow-up I was looking for. So I gave this a 7 out of 10. And with that, I'm closing It Chapter 2 on this massive... the book apparently is like... I don't know if it's 2,000 pages, but long as fuck is from what I heard. If they do a supercut, I'm not sure I'm going to watch it, honestly. It would be interesting to see what we end up doing, or what they end up doing. But overall, I know this is doing pretty good at the box office right now. I had really high high impressions for it. Sorry, high expectations for it. But you know what? I thought it was a solid horror movie, is what I would say. Thank you for listening to the LuckyDog Podcast. Check out all the other LuckyDog Podcasts at gmail.com. If you're interested in the It Chapter 1 review, just scroll down just a little bit and you'll find that. Posted just the other day. We are going through doing a Mr. Robot review, rewatch on Season 1 at the moment, and hopefully we're catching up through Season 3 for the Season 4 premiere at the beginning of October. One of my favorite shows, Mr. Robot. Excellent. We just checked out Travis Scott's Look Mom, I Can Fly documentary on Netflix. Just checked out Midsommar 2019, Good Boys 2019, and Succession on HBO, one of my new favorite television shows that I'm currently watching Season 2 on. And we've got a recap for one of those, the opening season, and we'll have an ending podcast for the end of Succession as well. So be sure to check out all these podcasts coming down the tube. I appreciate you listening to the LuckyDog Podcast. We cannot do this without you. Check out SoundCloud, rate us on Apple iTunes. If you're feeling generous, son, then throw a quarter or a dollar or who knows what. PayPal.me/LuckyDogPodcast. Thank you for listening, and we have a lot of listeners coming from, obviously, the States as usual, but and I appreciate everyone in the States, don't think I don't, but outside the States, we have a large Pakistani audience, Italian, people from the UK chiming in, all Germany's coming in, Poland, a little bit of Iran, Egypt, we got some Middle Eastern love out there, so we appreciate it. Peru, some Latin, okay, I like that. Netherlands, I see you. Switzerland, thank you for listening, and take it easy.
For 27 years, I dreamt of you. I craved you. I missed you.
We need to finish it. For good.
I've seen all of us die. It consumes us from the inside until we don't have a choice anymore.
You lied. And I died. You lied. And I died.
I did forget to mention that the elderly lady that happened to be possibly a descendant or a daughter of Pennywise, like, there is kind of a big plot line there, and they just barely touch on it. I just think this is one of those things that go along with drop plot lines, and if they would have just had a little extra time to pan it out or make more sense, or if we could have found out who maybe Pennywise was, back in the day, or if I thought he was just a recreation of all our fears and just kind of manifestation of it, but I don't know. It did seem like this guy might actually have a backstory, and for some reason they just kind of half-assed it, half-wrote it, half-baked it.